What I'm doing is actually referring all this to a literal application the best as I can prescribe it, apart from the spiritual. Daniel 7 verse 8. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in his horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Now, 3 of the first horn are also known as 3 other kings, leaders, which were also part of the first 10 horns. The word plucked up has a verb phrase, which means to summons or rouse. To rise, to arouse up, to rouse up. And the synonym of the word summons means to come together. To summon together. Synonym of the word pluck also means gather together. Came up. So, by understanding this different wordplay, because the Bible sometimes you can see it one way and then a revelation can come another way. And among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up. So, if I look at it that way, before whom, before this little horn, there were 3 that were summoned up by the roots. There were 3 that came up by the roots. There were 3 that roused together. There were 3 that were summoned together. There were 3 that assembled by the roots. There were 3. Now also another synonym for the word plucked is converge. The verb for converge means tend to meet at some point. Not parallel, but at a point. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up. Therefore, saying 3 that will come up together at some point by the roots. Now you can also look at it by pulling some weeds out of the ground, plucked up. But I'm not referring to it, I'm trying to bring a different understanding. Now when it says by the roots, roots are something deep. Jesus himself, the word itself, in Romans 11:16 says, for if the first fruits be holy, the lump is also holy. And if the root be holy, so are the branches. So this root, although it's talking about a branch, is not referring to an actual tree, like this being plucked up by the roots. The word is referring to a family lineage, a family line, a root. If the first fruits be holy, if the roots be holy, so is the lump. And Jesus is the root of our Christianity. Consider the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots, lifted up by the roots, which it means lifted up, plucked up. They were lifted up by family. Now if I go according to that interpretation, I see Caesar's as a possible king. Now when I look at it, it can say before whom, before this little horn, there were 3 which came up together by the lineage. There were 3 which assembled together by a lineage that came together at some point through family. Okay? That's my controversial theology, which I'm going to be blamed for. That is the theology, and I will get to the point in a minute. So being plucked up by the roots, okay? 3 were plucked up. I was plucked up. When you see Daniel 7, verse 7 and 8, they have a certain understanding. When you turn to Daniel 7:20, it says, and of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that has eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellow, is similar to the very same verses in 7:8 that I just read. Daniel 7 is like Revelations. Daniel 7 has a beginning and an end, a beginning and an end, and a beginning and an end, all in one chapter. Similar to like Revelations, who has 3 major pieces that instruct themselves as 3 beginnings and 3 beginnings and 3 beginnings and ends when put together accordingly. Also in Daniel 7 verse 24, you'll see, and the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them. And he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High. This verse is also similar to the other 2 verses which I just described. They just are taken and spoken of differently. In verse 20, it says, before whom 3 fell. Now, before whom, which is the little horn which came up. The word fell is a past tense for the word fall. So they didn't fall at that time, they had already fell. Before whom 3 fell. So he comes up and they fell. So they could have fallen behind. They were possibly made a little lower, being that he is now higher than them. They fell in position. They had no political authority or support. Now, seeing that they maybe had no political authority at the time of Augustus Caesar, Julius Caesar was dictator. So now Augustus is acting as ruler. Maybe he had more influence in the government, like today. Maybe he had more pull and more support. Maybe he had friends in other various places a little bit higher than the actual heir, Mark Caesar Anthony, who committed suicide because of a battle that he lost. And he was actually family from family that was who knows how long. Daniel 7 verse 20, and of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell. So boom, they had fallen, he had risen. He became higher than the rest of them. Verse 24, and the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall arise after them. And he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. Now, subdue is the word I'm going to be professing right now. Subdue, the verb for subdue is to intimidate or do it persuasively as well. You can subdue someone by persuading them to do something you want to do.
Persuade.
And actually persuading them to do something for you, making you more authoritative than they are, subduing them under your will.
That's more powerful, yeah.
You can subdue someone by intimidating them. Another verb for subdue is to exceed. To exceed. Anything you exceed of, you subdued anything under you. So he exceeded his predecessors. Another verb for subdue is to bring under control, especially by an exertion of will. Exertion means to exercise as a power or faculty. To exercise power, exertion. To bring under control, especially by an exertion of the will. The synonym for subdue is vanquish. To be victorious over, and to overcome, and to master. He was victorious over his predecessors by being leader of the new Roman Empire, subduing everything under him, masterfully exceeding his predecessors and being victorious. Augustus Caesar was part of the second triumvirate to try to be sole rulers over the Roman Empire. Marcus Lepidus was later driven into exile and stripped of his position. So here we see something of subduing. But although this person is not part of the family or even could be considered as a horn, we see then Mark Antony later committing suicide because of a battle that he lost. Augustus Caesar maybe even persuading one of his allies through conspiracy to allow Mark Antony to lose the battle, or maybe it was just a lie of his suicide altogether. There are many conspiracies that hide a lot of things, but I don't know. Now, if the Jews called Caesar a king, although he wasn't literally a king, it gave him position and power. Mark Antony, who was also a sole leader of the Roman Republic at that time, three of the most highest over the Rome, was also could have been considered a horn. And being that he was family, and we have an empire of Caesars that date back to probably 400 BC, that was probably in and out of office and just ruled the whole government. From the 7 kings to dictators, we see the Jews calling Caesar king. So we have Mark Antony, who could have been possibly one of the horns. And we see Julius Caesar, who was a dictator, which was obviously one of the horns. And then we also have his cousin, Lucius Julius Caesar IV, who was praetor and consul right before Julius Caesar entered into office as dictator. And they also becoming joint magistrates as family together. This Lucius Caesar IV was son of the one who was the first one in 90, who was also consul and praetor. He's the fourth. Mark Antony is their son. So we have a one horn, Lucius, the son of the first one up there, which were a horn. We have Julius Caesar, who is a brother from brothers, a 2-horn, and his son Mark Antony. So we have 3 horns that were in a line together, and so many other horns. But at this time, because of Julius Caesar, who was dictator over Rome, the second dictator in office, he's considered a horn because he's ruling power. Mark Antony can also be considered a horn because he's family, and he is also sole leader of the second triumvirate within there. And Lucius, I consider a horn just because he's part of a major family system that was anointed council and praetor, being ruler also and acting king of Rome, when the first dictator had died in that 1 year period or so. He was part in there. So being that Caesars were considered kings, I, by my theology, look at it at that perspective. Now those are 3 of the 7 true kings that ruled Rome. These are 3 that were enacting kings. And then we see the little horn that came up and established the Roman Empire and canceling the Roman Republic, canceling the council seat's power, and I don't know what happened to praetor. So I consider this the little horn.